welcome everyone. I'm going to wait just 1 or 2 more minutes to give a few more people a chance to log on here. While we're waiting, anybody have um, anything that you want to talk about? I'll give you a chance here in a second. But you also notice in the chat section here, if you check chat, there is a link to my day one class for forms. You could open that link and find the contracts package and follow along in the future if you want to download it or print it, whatever. And if you have a problem, Jocelyn said shoot her an email, but it is in the chat section for you. Thank you for doing that today for us. Okay. I get a lot of questions about walkthrough and home inspection, etc. So I want to first start out with walkthrough, and then we'll answer any questions about home inspection. Okay. So in paragraph 9, it used to be paragraph 10, but our contract changed July 1st. It talks about walkthrough. So regardless of whether contract is contingent upon home inspections and/or other inspections, seller will provide the broker, that's the agent, and the buyer reasonable access to property to make walk-through inspections. It's not just one walkthrough. They have the right to do multiple walkthroughs if there's problems, etc. 7 days prior, within the 7 days prior to settlement and/or occupancy. So if I had a list of things that the seller was supposed to fix in the contract per our home inspection contingency, then I need more than one final walkthrough in order to make sure this stuff was done. I might come out 7 days prior and then do my final walkthrough. And this is what throws a lot of people. It doesn't say make a final walkthrough. It says walkthrough inspections. So even if I did my first inspection, I'm still going back on the way to settlement and make sure the seller hasn't done any damage to the property leaving. Now, and/or occupancy. So if we have a pre or a post occupancy agreement, it takes 2 walkthroughs, one to satisfy the contract. Okay. So that is different than the one for the occupancy. So if the seller is staying in the property, buyer's agents, you do the walkthrough with the buyer for the settlement. The buyer then does another walkthrough with the seller. You're not involved in it, okay? Because they have to establish the condition of the property as of the occupancy. Because the walkthrough might be that the property had to be in the same condition as of contract date, okay? Or date of offer, I'm sorry. And that might be a different condition altogether from what is happening at the settlement. So it takes 2 walkthroughs if there's a post or a pre-occupancy. Okay? Now, NVAR has a pretty good walkthrough form for leasing a property, or I don't know what you use when you do your walkthrough other than the walkthrough form. Check yes or no, it's in the same condition, but please be aware. Now, I also point out, look, okay, this says broker and buyer. If you're not on the sales contract, you shouldn't be at the walkthrough. Okay. So no, they can't bring inspectors, etc., with them unless, and we have to go back to page 90 here, so bear with me. Now, this is your inspection contingency removal addendum. And you'll notice there can be multiple numbers of these. So I might have one for my first home, for my home inspection. And then I might have another one for my radon inspection or private well and water inspection. Each one can be removed separately. Now, the key to all this, and I know we've done this before, but just in case for you, upon seller's agreement to remedy specific existing deficiencies listed below with the buyer's proposed remedies. Don't just put here, see home inspection report, because basically all you ask the seller to do at that point is see the report. You didn't list a specific deficiency, nor did you list a proposed remedy. Also, be very careful how you put replace refrigerator and kitchen. If I'm driving home one night with my pickup truck and I see one at the curb and I pick it up and I put it in my house, did I replace the refrigerator? Yes. Okay. So you've got to spell it out. Okay. Spell it out. Now, here's where it gets interesting. You still have to give a complete copy of the inspection report or reports for information and review, not for requiring work to be done. Information and review. Unless otherwise specified above, remember all repairs have to be done by a licensed contractor to do the type of work required, and receipts or other written evidence have been completed will be provided prior to buyer's final walkthrough inspection or inspections of property. When do most agents do their final walkthrough of a property? On the way to settlement, which means that seller has all the way up until that time to get the repairs done. The problem being, if the repairs weren't made and the buyer is asking for a credit from a seller, the title company can't agree to that and add it to the CD, closing disclosure, even if all parties agree. It would have to go back to the lender to have that added. Now, if you're the lender and we're asking for a $4,000 or $5,000 credit for these repairs, you may start thinking, do I really want to make this loan? So what you need to do, okay, and it says that we have the right to do our final walkthroughs within 7 days prior to settlement and or occupancy. Okay. Now, if I'm asking for repairs, I'm probably saying that all these repairs have to be completed 8 days prior to settlement, not before my final walkthrough. So if I'm a buyer myself, I'm probably going to change this if there's repairs that we're asking to be fixed and they have to be completed well before my final walkthrough. That way, if there was a major thing that did not get repaired, my buyer still has time to get estimates from licensed contractors to do that type of work, maybe even try to do an addendum with the seller to see if the lender will allow this work to be done and paid for out of settlement, and then they can have time to do their change their CD to allow it. The problem is, under the Dodd-Frank Act, the purchaser has to receive 3 days prior to settlement their final CD. Okay, so you got to get all this stuff done into the lender well ahead of time to see if they'll allow for it to be paid. The other problem with this now, okay, if that seller does agree to make any repairs, okay, then the seller will provide broker, buyer, and licensed, if applicable, professional insured inspectors retained by the buyer reasonable access to property to make final walkthrough inspections within 7 days prior to settlement and or occupancy. So when that seller agrees to fix one thing, now you're allowing that home inspector back to do the walkthrough with the purchaser. Now, they should only be inspecting that work that was required, but it doesn't say that here. So I'm not sure as a seller that I am going to agree to fix anything. I may give you a credit, okay, that your lender will allow. And once again, we'd have to see how the lender wants this structured. I might give a credit, but I'm not agreeing to fix anything. Why would I want to open my home up to this inspection? The other problem is, even if I agree to fix stuff here, okay, 1, 2, 3 items, can I even in that time period before settlement find a licensed contractor to do the work? And if I can they get the material to do it? Because we still have some supply chain issues on getting material to properly do the work. So when it comes to the questions I was getting, did they have the right to bring that inspector? Well, my question was, did the seller agree to fix anything? Then yes, they had the right to bring them. If the seller said no, then no, it's just the agent and the purchasers. Any questions about that? And I do have most of you muted, so if you're on mute, you'll have to unmute yourself to ask the question.
I have a question, Larry.
Okay.
So I actually had a call from an agent last week, and her client sent for the final walkthrough a home inspector on a deal where they were not allowed to bring anybody else through. And so I instructed her to just wait there with them and make sure that the inspector was understood that they're not allowed on the premises. Is that fair, do you think, or?
Yes, yes. They aren't allowed unless there was work done under a home inspection addendum form.
Yep, it was completely as is. And then on top of that, they even started asking for things to be fixed. So yeah, it just completely opened a whole can of worms.
Yeah,
So
that's, and I've heard that quite a bit. That's the reason I'm going over this and showing the language where it is, so that people know. Matter of fact, I recommend a lockbox being taken down and the listing agent meet the people at the property to let them in for their walkthroughs.
that was another thing I suggested is switching it to either a combo box or just removing the box entirely.
Yeah, don't be real careful how you switch to a combo box, because your listing agreement only covers if somebody breaks into that property, and through the electronic box, we're not responsible. So if you're going to put a combo in a box, you need written permission from a seller to do that.
Good
So,
to know.
so I usually, so if you look at your listing agreement, we only had the right to put up a what? The electronic box, and we have a hold harmless in there for that. So be very careful with the combo boxes, even for getting contractors in. Matter of fact, I know this is a pain, but I usually recommend that the agent tells the seller that they have to get the box and put their box up, and they give access to the property. But
That makes sense too.
I know that's not the way it's done, but for covering your assets, it's probably the best avenue to go.
Thank you.
Good input. And that's why we're doing this, because people do try to bring people. They're not even supposed to bring mom and dad or anybody else unless they're on the contract.
Okay. The question there is, can you why did the seller not want to have the people look into the house then? What's the reason for that?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Can you do that again, Carl?
No, I'm asking the lady, can she guess why the seller would not want that person in the house though?
They didn't, it's not that they didn't want the person, they don't want the home inspector in because the contract was completely as is, and the home inspector was basically doing a home inspection instead of a walkthrough, and they were finding things wrong with the house. And now the buyer's saying, these things are wrong, we want you to fix them,
Oh, I
even
see.
though they could have said no. But
Yeah.
now we have maybe a settlement that doesn't happen.
No, essentially, there were two bites of the apple. The seller said, no, you only get one bite. Okay, I got it.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Good.
I have
Any
a
other
question. Can
input?
you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So let's say on your final walkthrough, something happened, which did not happen during the time that you sent in a contract or you ratified the contract. And you, let's say, find out that during the final walkthrough that the HVAC is not working. So what are your options there at that point?
Okay, so first of all, what did the contract say? Was it working as of the date of, did you have a home inspection so you could prove it was working? Or did it say date of offer and the seller saying, no, it worked on the date of offer?
Date of offer.
Or it didn't work on the date of offer? So,
It was working on the,
okay, so you have proof it was working at some time. And then you're saying at the walkthrough, it did not work. So here's the deal. When did you do your walkthrough? Was it just prior to settlement?
but
So
3
if the
days
walk-
prior.
Yeah, so if the walkthrough's then, so your options are, you can ask the seller to fix it, okay? And you take the seller's word for it, okay, that they will. Or you could ask for a credit, but the problem with the credit is now your settlement's not gonna happen because they're gonna have to go back to the lender, see if the lender will allow the credit, which most lenders will not allow the credit, okay? Or if you had had time, the other possibility, if this had been discovered sooner, and sometimes it can't be, I understand that, but if it had been sooner, you might have been able to get the money, an estimate from your own contractor as the buyer, okay? And then had the seller give the funds to the company that you chose, okay? And they've already been paid, and that, then they would go ahead and do the work and be paid afterwards. And it was it was the contractor of that your buyer selected, and they've already been paid. Okay, those would be the options. So here's the walkthrough form, and it says, and notice the date on this form. It's back to 1/16. So here's the choices: seller to correct without an escrow, seller to credit the buyer X amount of dollars. Now, if it's a cash deal, cash transaction, that's fine because it doesn't need a lender approval, right? Because now the title company can just change the sheets right there because there's no third party that had to prepare the CD, or repairs to be made and paid from funds held in escrow by the settlement agent. Escrow funds are or are not the limit of the seller's liability. Now, it's fine that the funds will be held by the escrow settlement agent, but it's still, if there's a lender involved, has to show up on the CD, which means it has to go back to the lender for them to allow it. Now, this is the other problem with this. I love this when I sit there at a table in the past and they said the escrow funds are the limit of the seller's liability. And I hear agents sitting there discussing what they think this repair will cost. Okay, which dumbfounds me because how do you guys know what it will cost? Okay, and once they start the repair, you don't know what else will be found. So VA, I'll use VA as an example. VA will allow escrow of funds to make a repair, but it's 125% of the estimate that you received. They want 25% more held in escrow than what it will actually cost, because they know every time somebody starts something, another problem arises. I could give you an example. My son is remodeling my main bath in my house. He and his wife and my grandson are living there until they find another home. And he took down the walls. He was just going to replace the tile in the bath. He already did the rest of the bathroom. And when he took it down, the wall was molded and all the joists were, all the boards were rotted behind it. So this is turning into a major job. He had to remove the whole wall, the exterior wall, and build everything back, which he's very handy, he's doing. But if you had a contractor in there and found all that, you're probably looking at that 25% difference. So how do we come up with the figure? Best way is written estimates from contractors. The only way you could have done that is if you found the problem beforehand. But when you do your final walkthrough, ACs can break. I understand. Okay. But remember, if there's a loan involved, you've got to have the lender's permission for escrows. So unless otherwise specified, all repairs will be performed by a contractor licensed to do the type of work required. So even if they could get a contractor out there today, it might be something minor with the AC, but it could require a whole complete what? New AC unit. So it's a tough situation. But those are your choices. And while we're on this form, this walkthrough form, it's one of my favorite forms of all time for NAR. It says, in accordance with the sales contract, walkthrough inspection or inspections, okay, of the property were made on these dates. So you might have more than one walkthrough inspection form. The following existing items were inspected to determine if they are in substantially the same physical condition as of the date specified in the property maintenance and condition paragraph. Okay, except as otherwise agreed. Now, buyer may wish to inspect items not listed below if there were other items. Okay, and so you're going to check and make sure everything is done, checked out, and in substantially the same condition as the date in the property maintenance and condition paragraph. So if the date chosen in paragraph 9 was date of offer, and you come up with this list of items and you bring it to me at the settlement table, the seller, and the first one is repair leaky faucet and master bedroom. And I turn to Honey and I say, Honey, you know that sink you've been trying to get me to fix for you for the last 2 years? They want me to fix it for them. What do you think about that? So when you have date of offer, you're pretty much at the mercy of what party? It's honesty, the seller. At least if you had a home inspection and it said you had 10 items and I agreed to fix 5 items and not fix 5, and you agreed to that, okay? Then that's where the accept as otherwise agreed comes in. So you're doing the walkthrough. There was never an alarm system, still no alarm system, put in A. The built-in microwave worked just fine. At home inspection, still works fine. Then it's substantially the same condition, it's yes. Now, I said I would get the clothes dryer repaired. I did. You check the clothes dryer and it works fine now. The buyer's happy with it. Which box do you check on this form? Anybody want to unmute and tell me which box you check? Do you check yes, no, or not applicable?
Check no.
You check no. Correct. Because if you checked yes, it would still have to be what?
Same
Broken.
condition as before.
It had to be the same condition, so broken.
Yes.
So a lot of people have trouble with this form because they still think, yes, it's fine. No, it's not. Okay. I said I would not fix the clothes washer. It worked fine, in my opinion. Your buyer said, okay. They check it. It still works lousy, but it works the same way it was. Which box do you check?
Yes.
You check yes. It's still lousy, right? So a lot of times I see nothing checked in these boxes, and just in the remarks section, it says, everything was fine.
Uh-huh.
Now, I often get the question, does the buyer have to do a walkthrough? No, they have the right to, but they don't have to. Okay. Any questions about that? So anytime you find something wrong and there's going to be a credit given by the seller to the buyer, make sure if there's a loan involved that the lender, okay, that the lender approves well in advance, get it on the CD, and because that CD has to be given to the purchaser within 3 days before settlement, I mean, at least 3 days before settlement. And if they can't, and that CD is going to change, then they need to extend the settlement to do it. And your loan commitment might expire. So a lot of times, rather than have a loan expire that's going to cost me more money, I may just agree to these items if they're minor and say, no, I'm not taking the property. Okay. Now, I also want to point out, and people say, well, we didn't like the walkthrough, therefore the buyer wants to cancel the contract. I'm telling you, my advice is before you refuse to settle, purchaser, you better talk to your attorney. Okay. You better talk to your attorney because you may very well be in default under your sales contract because paragraph 25, default. If the buyer fails to complete settlement for any reason other than a default by the seller, buyer will be in default, and at the option of the seller might be your deposit or sue for liquidated damages. And it's going to take a judge to look at whether or not this item was so detrimental to the sales contract that it would render the contract unenforceable, especially when we have this clause back here that says, let me find it here. The provisions not satisfied at settlement will survive the delivery of the deed and will not be merged therein. Okay, so the fact that they didn't fix a small item on a home inspection, I don't think that's going to be something that would give the purchaser the right not to settle. And if I have to get an attorney because you breached your contract and wouldn't settle, then you're going to be entitled, you're going to be paying all of my legal expenses entitled, including the part, any other damages I have suffered. So be real careful if they're not going to settle because they didn't like their walkthrough. Before you don't show up a settlement, get yourself an attorney and have them give you advice. I can't do that for you. Any questions about any of that? I'm not going to go over the home inspection addendum form today or the rest of paragraph 9. I'll do that maybe next week's session. I don't want to, try to combine the two. I was more interested in walkthrough and how do you handle the problems of walkthrough? Anything else anybody else wants to ask or discuss today? If so, unmute yourself. And I'm thrilled that we have,
Okay, I called NAR a couple of days ago, and I was asking for more information on obtaining a GRI. I've noticed that there's a number of states which don't actually conform to. They're not interested in GRI designations. Can you tell me what that does and some of the limitations of some of the drawbacks of some of the what does that what's a GR? Of course,
Okay.
I know what a designation is, but the thing is, I'm just wondering why these states some do, some don't. Virginia's one that does.
it's a state program. Okay, so GRI is run by each individual state. They have to decide, and a lot of states don't have enough members to make it worthwhile. So if you want information on GRI, you have to go to Virginia Association of Realtors. There's a series of 12 classes that you have to take. We used to have to go away for a week at a time. And they had day 1, 2, and 3, and you had to pass the exam at the end of each day. And they always handled it at the Ramada Inn in Charlottesville. So we said GRI stood for Graduate of Ramada Inn.
I see.
They changed the program. They're now individual one-day sessions. They offer them all over the state of Virginia through different associations. VAR does theirs in person. Some of them might be Zoom. I actually was on the GRI staff until this past year, and I resigned from the staff. But they're good basic classes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them you have to do online, but the other ones, in person, especially for agents that want to get up to speed or new agents that are looking for good education. I will warn you that if you take those classes, they are based on VAR material, not NVAR material. So like the contracts class is going to be based on that contract, which is basically on or about. So if we don't make settlement, we'll still get there. And VAR is on or before, which is time is of the essence, you must do it. Now, so I consider you getting your real estate license like a bachelor's degree, and then VAR would be your graduate degree, and then CRS, which are national classes, they are NAR classes. Okay, CRS is like your doctorate degree, so in real estate. Most people generally get their GRI before they do their CRS, because it's basic classes that lead up to these more detail.
So as a person in Northern Virginia, are you saying now that probably I don't have to really go too far distance-wise in order to get through that program?
No, NVAR will offer all 12 sections. So you need to check with them when they do it, but they have to get enough people to hold the class because they have to cover the expense to VAR plus the cost of the inspector.
And how
So
many teachers, how many realtors are able to teach that GRI in this area in Northern Virginia?
Well, the instructors might come from some other part of the state.
I see. Uh-huh.
Okay, so they have a staff, and you have to go through, their program and be approved to be one of their instructors.
And maybe,
I chose not to do it anymore because I just didn't do that many of their classes. They just didn't seem to,
it doesn't fit. Okay.
And so I decided to concentrate on the National Association of Realtor classes that I teach, like ABR, how to represent buyers, ABR, how to represent sellers, senior real estate specialist. And we do offer those classes here at Fairfax Realty,
yes.
and we'll have some coming up. I mean, I just did a short sale class for NVAR. We'll
Yes.
do it here, okay? The nice thing about here is RTS Title or Fairfax Realty usually subsidizes the cost to help keep it down a little bit for the agents.
And final question, Larry, is One comment was that you can complete this GRI in 32 hours. Now, what does that mean? That doesn't seem reasonable.
Who said you could do it in 30? There's no way you can do it in 32 hours.
I see.
Each class is 6 to 8 hours. And you
Okay.
have to pass an exam at the end of each module.
Okay.
And if
So
you don't pass the exam, they give you a second chance to take it. And if you don't pass it, then you have to take the course over again.
I see what you
So,
mean.
but there's no way you can do it in 32 hours.
Okay. And there's 12.
Larry, question regarding those inspections, and it says 7 days prior to settlement or occupancy.
Correct.
Settlement is understood. Why is the occupancy?
Because you might have a post-occupancy agreement where the seller gets to stay, or a pre-occupancy where the buyer can move in before settlement. So if it's pre-occupancy, the walkthrough is going to be before they occupy. You're going to have that walkthrough for the settlement, which will happen sometime later. It might be even 30 days later for the settlement, but your walkthrough's already been done. And that's because if that purchaser is preoccupying and now they move into the property, you know they're going to start finding more things wrong, between then and settlement, even if it's a short.
So it's granted that the walkthrough is prior to settlement, right?
Correct. Was
Okay.
prior to settlement, unless there's going to be a pre-occupancy. So if there's going to be a pre-occupancy where that buyer is going to move into that property before settlement and give some rent, credit to, pay some money to the seller for the opportunity to be there, then you've got to do your walkthrough for the settlement prior to they move in, not prior to settlement.
Three. Yes.
All right, and could you also review that the paragraphs for if items were not done prior to settlement or walkthrough? These
Okay.
you had like several one of those, so you can just
So
maybe walk me.
so paragraph 30 is entire agreement.
Okay.
Okay. So the contract right here in paragraph 30, the provisions not satisfied at settlement will survive the delivery of the deed and will not be merged therein. So in years prior, now this goes back a ways, we had to make sure everything was satisfied before settlement, because after settlement, it was over. Okay. Settlement merged into the deed. It was over.
Yeah.
So now they changed the language that the provision is not satisfied, even though we received a deed, things not completed under this contract, we can still go back and enforce. Okay. So when they changed this language to survive the delivery of the deed, that meant we didn't have to have everything wrapped up prior to settlement. Now, what we found in the past, and what these lenders found in the past, when there's a credit given to the buyer for repairs to be done on a property after settlement, that buyer usually never makes those repairs.
Right.
So what was happening in the past, okay, we would be getting credits knowing that they needed the money really for what purpose?
They pay it.
To settle on the property. Okay. And so the lenders generally will no longer allow those credits, okay, for something to be fixed. They may very well agree that if the money's put in escrow with the attorney, okay, that they will allow it. They don't really like to do that under Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So I think the best option would be, have the money already to the contractor that the purchaser selected, and the seller cut that check prior to settlement. It's there. Okay. And the funds have already cleared. Their contractor's been paid. Now the buyer, selected the contractor, they can control it. Now, so if a provision is not satisfied at settlement, okay, then paragraph 24 deals with attorney's fees. So if you didn't do something that the contract said, you breached a contractual term, right? So you said you would fix all these things, you didn't, and now we've settled and that my contract didn't merge in, then I am the buyer, I didn't cause the problem, seller, you did. And if you're not gonna fix this, I'm gonna get legal counsel to enforce my rights under this contract because that part of the contract hasn't been settled. Okay? And not only can I get, be entitled to recover against the breaching party, what they were supposed to do, and any other damage is recoverable, including legal expenses incurred enforcing its rights under the contract. Now, my caution to buyers, you better make sure that you are right, because if it's like $1,000 or less item, okay, and we're arguing whether or not this was or should be or not be, if you get an attorney and I get an attorney as the seller, and the courts decide, well, I was the substantially prevailing party as the seller, then your buyer is going to be paying all of my legal expenses. And $1,000 or less item gets you where? How much on the attorney fees before you use up $1,000 or less?
2
So
hours.
so I tell people, use some common sense here, okay? You could always, after settlement, rather than starting a lawsuit, just get an attorney to write a letter. Sometimes just seeing, attorney's name on the bottom of a letter will cause the other party to, go ahead and make sure they do what they were supposed to after settlement. Okay. Does that all make sense?
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
I just wondered if you cross out the word that does not merge, you put down it, you cross out the word not, and then thing. Are you saying that the lender is not gonna honor that contract?
The lender's not a party to
In
the
other words, you say, in other words, go to the old time where
you-
it merges.
well, if I'm a buyer,
Yes.
why would I agree that everything merged into the settlement if it were problems with the property?
This is hypothetical.
Yeah, no, hypothetical, if it was taken out, then
Yeah.
everything does merge into the deeded settlement.
But would the lender say go to another lender? In other words, he's not.
I don't think it would affect the lender at
Well,
all.
You're just. I thought you said the lender is not interested in.
The lender is not interested in giving a credit. Once you find problems and you ask for a credit at the settlement table, say of $3,000, well, who creates the closing disclosure? It's not the attorneys. The closing disclosure is done
From
by
the
what
bank.
part? It's done by the lenders under TRID, Truth in
That's right.
Lending Trust
Yes.
Integrated Disclosure Act.
Yeah.
So that has to go back to that lender. Now, if you're the lender and all of a sudden people are asking for a $3,000 credit, okay, you might say, I'm not sure that I want to sign off on this. Maybe I need to get my appraiser or somebody out there to what? Check it out. So I'm just telling you, that could be a problem when that request for additional money on the CD goes back to that lender. It might be, a red flag to them, like maybe there's something wrong with this property that we need to better take a look at before we agree to this.
Okay. I
Okay,
got it.
okay. Good questions. Any others?
Larry,
Yes.
I have a question on the 7 days before the settlement. So
Uh-huh.
what is your recommendation on how many days, if that's the case, should be 8 days before the settlement days?
Well, if I'm the buyer and we do a home inspection and there's like $20,000 worth of stuff that has to be fixed, okay? And our form says the seller has up until the final walkthrough to complete the work. Well, when do most agents do the final walkthrough?
Hmm.
On the day of settlement.
On the day of settlement. And if there's like $10,000 worth of stuff that still hasn't been done, we're probably not going to have a contracted settlement because there's no way they're going to get a credit for 10 grand. Okay. So the form allows them up until then on this walkthrough form. And let me go back to the walkthrough form here, back on page 90. Sorry about that. Okay, so here on the home inspection contingency removal, okay, it says the buyer has to have all this stuff done prior to the buyer's final walkthrough. But we have the right to do inspections within 7 days. So if I'm a buyer and I have like 8 items that I'm listing here, I'm thinking, can they get all that stuff done? And do I have time afterwards? So I might change that all this work has to be done prior, and 8 days prior. But if we only have one minor item here, a leak in a sink or something or another, and the owners agreed to fix it, okay, then I may not need 8 days. Okay. But, but I might still go out there on what day to do my first walkthrough. I
7.
might go out 4 days prior or 3 days prior just to make sure it's done. And if not, remind everybody it had to be done by the time we do our final walkthrough. Now, where are you going to get pushback from agents, especially agents that have been around this business for a long, long time? How many walkthroughs do most agents think a buyer is entitled to?
1.
One. Okay. And that's not what our contractors said for a long, long time. Okay. And you might get pushback, and that's when you have to remind them, this says walkthroughs, walk-through inspections. Now, if you don't want walk-through inspections, then as a listing agent, you can start crossing out all the what? All the S's.
Yes.
Now, the good news is, how many agents have any clue that any of this is in the contract and they just going to do how many walkthroughs?
One.
One on the way to settlement.
Mhm.
But if the house was in good condition and, I may just wait until the last day to do my inspection, knowing that the owner has taken pride in ownership. They've kept their house in that kind of shape all along. They're probably good people. They'll take care of it. Most times, everybody gets along and we can solve the issue.
All right.
Any other questions?
No.
Good. Well, next week then, I think what we'll do is I'll take a further look at paragraph 9 and the actual home inspection addendum form and discuss those items to tie in with what we just did about walkthroughs.
That CE that you had the other day, Larry, when will that be showing up on my credit down?
Not until I teach the class next week. We're adding that all to the roster next week, and then I'll turn it in. So I'm teaching CE here at the Tyson's office in person on the 23rd and 24th. If anybody needs CE, you can contact them here. In the class I did the other day, we're giving 4 hours of elective, but it will be added to the 24th. And I'll be submitting that on Friday, the 25th. So by the end of the month, it should be showing up.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
So if anybody does need CE,
Mhm,
just contact them here at
mhm.
Tyson's office and get yourself on the list, and we'll be doing it from 9 to 4 or so on the 23rd and 24th. We will get all 16 hours of it in for you.
Uh-huh. Thank you so much. Uh-huh.
Okay? Well, thank you, guys. Thank you, guys, for joining me today and asking good questions. Keep the questions coming in these sessions. That's how we all learn.
Thanks,
If there's
Larry.
no other questions?
Thanks,
we'll talk-
Larry.
Yes.
Thank you,
Larry.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you.
Larry, just a question. Is it possible to move the meetings? I know we had it from 11 to 12. A lot of times I have, other professional meetings also as well. Is it possible to move it from 12 to 1?
No, because I usually have other things that I have to do in the afternoon for teaching.
I see. Okay,
So-
just talk to us.
Yeah. Yeah, so,
Thank you.
but these are generally recorded, and we have a YouTube channel. So you can always go back and pick them up if you can't make one.
Got you.
That's why you hear recording in session. So,
Okay.
and
Larry,
that link is in the email that you get about the classes, the link to that YouTube channel.
All right,
Yes.
thank you.
Larry, the YouTube recording is up to date? Because I couldn't even find it.
The link and all is still good. I haven't gone there myself recently, but if there's a problem, let us know, and Nestor does it for us for free. So sometimes it takes a little while to get these things up on there, but there are archives of other ones. So yes.